Okay, so this is ninth and potentially the last video lecture of this chapter. This is, I want to talk a little bit about parenting style. So the last lecture I ended up talking about what discipline by definition is how you mold a child's character and they internalize self-control. But this slide is about some of the, I guess, the labels that we give to the styles of how, sort of the patterns of a way we parent. We might call those different styles. You might have heard of these before. I don't know. You have authoritarian, permissive. Sometimes we call that uninvolved. No, not permissive. Authoritative and neglectful or uninvolved. I get a couple of these kind of confused, but I think I figured out a way to keep them straight. Basically, what distinguishes one from the other is the balance of what we would call demands versus responsiveness. Demands are the expectations, right? Demands are the rules, the expectations, that, right? What does a parent expect the kid to do? Are they expected to follow the rule? Expected to have have lots of chores? How are they supposed to be in terms of their demeanor? Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, these kinds of things. Responsiveness is our privileges, time, attention. Do you spoil a kid, right? The things, how you respond to a child's needs, right? Okay, so I hope this makes some sort of sense. The authoritarian, and the way I'm going to keep these straight is if you think of authoritarian sort of like totalitarian versus authoritative, which is an authority. Authoritarian, right, like a totalitarian, they have lots of rules, they have lots of expectations. You're supposed to, for lack of a better example, you're supposed to be follow your curfew, do all your homework, get straight A's, show respect, do your chores, right? You're very strict. I guess that would be another word, very strict, with very few rewards, with low responsiveness. Maybe they're not very warm, maybe you don't have any privileges, they don't give you an allowance, maybe they're mean, right? There's not a responsiveness to your needs. So you have no privileges and lots of rules. That would be the authoritarian, or authoritarian, I'm using that to remember, like totalitarian. The other authority one, this is authoritative, and this is, let me actually go back to permissive, because permissive is like the other end of that. The permissive parent has no demands, no rules, not strict, you don't have a curfew, I don't care if you do your homework, you can have, there's no real expectations, but there's lots of things that they get, so they're high responsiveness. You have lots of privileges, I give you lots of attention, maybe I give you everything that you ask for, maybe they're very spoiled. So no demands, no rules, very few rules, and pretty much you get whatever you want. This is also not considered the ideal. Authoritative, see, I told you I get these confused. Authoritative, these are the parents that are the authority, right? So the authoritative parent, they have lots of expectations, but they also are highly responsive. So yes, I expect you to do your chores, I expect you to be respectful, you're supposed to be home when I say you're supposed to be home, but in return I will give you my attention, I will give you all things that you ask for, I will give you privileges. That's considered the most effective, or the sort of the best of both, is this sort of balance. Somewhere in this chapter, I think I ask you to reflect on your own parenting, how you were parented, or how you parent. You can choose either one. What was the style? There's a fourth one here that is actually what some textbooks have it, some textbooks don't. The neglectful or the uninvolved. So the neglectful or the uninvolved parent really has nothing, right? They don't have any demands. They're not emotionally available. They're not physically available. They don't care what you do. They're just not really there. And these are the neglected parents. Probably a permissive parent is better than sort of a neglectful parent. So I ask you to consider what you are kind of parenting style you're familiar with. Now, I would have told you, if you would have asked me, I would have told you that I was an authoritative parent. But my children tell me we were actually permissive. I thought we had rules, but I guess we didn't. We really only had one rule, and that was don't make be nice. and don't make our job harder. In other words, like if you make a mess, clean it up, because it makes more work for me to have to clean up your mess, right? Don't get in trouble at school. Do your homework, because to do different would make my job harder as a parent. But my children tell me we were permissive parents. So sometimes what you think you're doing and what you ultimately are doing are not the same, or what they experience. There's not a discussion in this version of the textbook about moral development, specifically through altruism and aggression, but I think this is a very interesting thing to talk about, and I have a little video, I think it's like a video discussion exercise on this topic. So I'll try not to talk too quickly on this one, but altruism is a social psychological term that says that we engage in pro-social behavior, and what I mean by pro-social behavior is antisocial behavior is not about being alone. Antisocial behavior is harmful behavior. So antisocial means you're the opposite of kind. Pro-social behavior is anything that's positively social. So kindness, generosity, helping someone, those are all considered pro-social behaviors. Altruism is a term given to a kind of pro-social behavior with no expectation of return. And if we had lots of time, we would have a philosophical conversation about if you think that there is such a thing. Do you think that anyone does something without some expectation of return, or do we do nice things because we are going to be thanked, because that makes us uncomfortable not to do a nice thing, or because we expect some sort of return? So the question in the context of this chapter is the moral development, or the development of an altruistic way of being amongst small children. And the little video, I ask you, do you think that what these children are doing is altruistic? Do you think that the way that they're helping the experimenter, why are they doing it? If they are doing it because they expect something in return, that would not be altruistic. I mean, it's still pro-social. Let's not assume that just because I expect a thank you, that's not still pro-social behavior. That's not what necessarily I mean. I actually think that everything we do, we expect some sort of return. If it's a psychological, I feel better, if it's a smile from someone, if it's because the divine, that God is watching, but I think that's fine. To do good to our fellow human is still good. I don't think it really matters what the motivation is. Okay, the opposite of altruism is aggression, right? And your book, I said, doesn't really go into a discussion about the different kinds of aggression, but I think this is still an interesting thing to think about when we're talking about the development of some sort of moral philosophy of children, or moral way of being. And what we do find is that boys and girls use aggression differently. Boys are more likely to use what we would call overt aggression. That's like they just push someone. And girls and women, I think this is true throughout our whole being, are more likely to use relational aggression. So a boy might use push or fight, and a girl and a woman might talk bad about somebody or manipulate relationships as a way of sort of getting their way. And that's really what aggression is, a kind of intentional injury or harm to another. Okay. Then the last slide is just a little bit about our birth order, actually. And there's a brief little discussion about the significance, or some of the stereotypes about only children. I'm an only child, and so I'm very familiar with people would say, well, you must be very spoiled. And the literature actually says that only children, I just didn't have anybody to share with. It's not that I got a whole lot more than other children. It's just that my parents had when you have more than one child, there are only 2 laps for the children to sit on, and so as an only child I never had to share my lap. I really never got picked on for no good reason. I also didn't have the same opportunities to learn how to negotiate. I didn't have the same opportunities to experience like being bullied or being picked on, right, by siblings. So your book is quite generous when it talks about, I think it's quite generous, when it suggests that there are no, that only children do. They usually learn more, they usually have a larger vocabulary. Academically, they may be a bit advanced for children that have siblings, but there are some other there are some limitations that only children don't have that children with siblings do have. They don't. Children with siblings do get less attention from their parent. They just do. I got a lot of attention from my parents, but there are things that we as only children don't really learn about interacting with our peers because we have and it says that only children don't have less opportunity to interact with peers, and I would actually disagree with that, because there has to be where if you have siblings, you are always surrounded by your peers, but only children, those peer interactions are maybe like institutionalized, like they happen at church or they happen at school. They happen in more sort of formal structured settings. So, but I think that I wonder if this trend is going to continue because more and more families are having fewer children. I used to be I didn't know anybody that was an only child, and now I know lots of people. And there is some evidence about birth order that we can talk about, like that the first child is likely to be the rule follower. They're going to enforce the rules on all the others. The last child is the one that kind of gets away with everything. And then the idea of the middle child, what is it? The middle child is the one that has to be the most successful in order to stand out, because the first one is like, oh, that's the one that everybody looks up to, and the baby is the baby, and so everybody wants to nurture the baby. But that middle kid, in order for them to get attention, they have to stand out, and so they're often more like successful than the others because they do that as a way to be more successful. So anyway, I hope I got everything that's in the textbook, and this is going to wrap up the chapter on 3 to 6 year olds. Thank you for listening.